Yes. So Maggie Asselstein, she is a pipe carrier, traditional hand drummer, mother, daughter, and sister. She has a mixed ancestry of both Haudenosaunee and Irish. Maggie has spent her career working within urban Indigenous community and also as a professor at Centennial College. Maggie is now the owner of a private practice in Durham region and continuing her work. So amazing. We're so lucky to have you here, Maggie, and we'd love if you can take us into our land acknowledgement.
I was having issues unmuting. I'm actually not going to do a land acknowledgement. What I will do is I will just task people to maybe acknowledge the land that they're on. So maybe do some research wherever you're kind of sitting right now, figure out what treaty that is. I think that that's a good way for us to acknowledge that land that we're on. What I am going to do though is I'm going to light a smudge. I will sing a song and I'll do an opening prayer just to kind of get together in a good way, start off your events that way. I'm just going to light some sage here. And it's interesting how the mayor had said, you know, the eyes, the mouth, and the ears. A lot of the times when we smudge, I just have it going in my bowl here. We want to smudge our eyes so that we can see. We want to smudge our ears so that we're listening. We want to smudge our mouth so we're speaking kind words. And we want to smudge our heart so that it's open. So it kind of aligns with what he was saying. So Segos gonna goaga. So that's hi. Do you carry peace in your heart? I carry peace in my heart. Neo ronya yanyats, kanahiaga tindanega, wakanayatin. So my name is Maggie. My spirit name is Morning Songbird. I'm mixed ancestry, Irish and Mohawk or Haudenosaunee. And I'm Turtle Clan. So I think what I'll do is I will do a little bit of a prayer for us. For you today, my friends, I raise sacred smoke. For you who are troubled, confused, doubtful, lonely, afraid, addicted, unwell, bothered, or alone, I raise sacred smoke. For those of you in sorrow, grief, or pain, I raise sacred smoke. For those of you who work for people, for change, for spiritual evolution, for the upward and outward growth of our common humanity and the well-being of our planet, I raise sacred smoke. For those of you in joy, in the glow of small or great triumphs, who live in love, faith, courage, and respect, I raise sacred smoke. And in the act of all of this, I raise it also for myself. So I'm going to sing an opening song. I have to change my sound here. Hey, hey, Guando de, oh, hey, Guando de, hey, hey, Guando de, oh, hey, Guando de, hey, Guando de, oh, hey. Guando day, hey, hey, Guando day, oh, hey, Guando day, hey, hey, Guando day, oh, hey, Guando day, hey, hey, Guando day, oh, hey, Guando day, hey, Guando day, oh, hey, Guando day, hey, hey, Guando day, oh, hey, Guando day. Hey, hey, Guando day, oh, hey, Guando day. Hey, Guando day, oh, hey, So that's a Mi'kmaq welcoming song, which I think sort of aligns with, what you guys are doing this week. A lot of Mi'kmaq people identify as Afro-Indigenous. So that's our Mi'kmaq welcoming song, and this is actually close to my heart as well. I'm a mother of an Afro-Indigenous child, so I'm excited to see kind of what we all talk about this week. Nyawagoa, which means thank you for having me here. Takiko, which means I'm done.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Maggie. Amazing. Thank you so, so much. Definitely think it's really important, like you said, for us to really recognize where we are and where we're situated on this land. So I definitely really appreciated that. And I believe now we'll be going into a Black Mental Health Day introduction with Brittany. So I believe Brittany's going to play for us a video.
Thank you, Rihanna. Yes, I have a video for us to watch. Starting now.
"400 years is long enough. Although conversations and awareness about racism and equity are increasing, we have only just begun.
From the very beginning, Taibu was very much interested in raising the awareness of mental health in the Black community across the city.
The way that people of color, Black people, move through the world means that you're going to experience, a very particular type of racism, and that's going to impact things like your mental health.
I think Black people come to service because we don't often get seen as being vulnerable to mental health challenge. Only comes about after we first engage other systems that are much more familiar with us.
So we can start a conversation within ourselves. We are suffering in silence. We are not very engaged with accessing or seeking support for the challenges that we face.
But it's like banging your head against a brick wall when it comes to getting folks to understand that specific issues of Black folks are different. One of the opportunities that we have is to raise that issue, to think about and strategize around how it is that we connect our actions to address the issue at scale.
I'm going to pass it off to Monique. Thank you for watching the video.
Hi, yes, good evening. So I just wanted to briefly just give a quick description as to what I do. So I'm an outreach and family well-being worker with I4RADA. For me, Black Mental Health Week is definitely something that is necessary, definitely something that we need in our community. And I feel like, as what was stated in the video, it tends to be overlooked at times. And I honestly, truly believe that within the work that we do, we are able to make a difference. And I believe that change will happen eventually, hopefully one day. So I just wanted to share a quick video. It's the Alicia Keys Lift Every Voice. So I'm going to share my screen and do that now. Okay. Are you guys able to see it? No. Brittany, is there any way that you could just pull up the Alicia Keys Lift Every Voice and Sing performance?
Yes, I can do that. One moment.
Thank you. Yes, I apologize. In the meantime, I just wanted to just quickly give you a brief statement just about anti-Black racism. So I was actually having a talk with my father, maybe about like a day or two ago, and he was mentioning to me some of the trials and tribulations, some of the struggles that he has within his workplace. And he said to me that they typically have a statement that they'll say before starting any shift. And it stuck out to me. So I just wanted to read that for you here. So it says, we have a responsibility to ensure our work contributes to ending anti-Black racism and anti-Indigenous racism, which cannot be done without critical self-reflection, education, and also dialogue. All right, Brittany, are you able to find that for me? Awesome, perfect, I'm good to go, thank you.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the glistening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has facing a rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on till
Wonderful. Thank you, Monique and Brittany, for sharing the video. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Keisha Christie. Keisha Christie is a dynamic storyteller and speaker. Keisha ignites the imagination and entices listeners with stories that entertain and educate. She connects people and culture through African and Caribbean folktales, Aesop fables, and original stories. Keisha facilitates workshops and performs in schools, libraries, festivals, as well as community and corporate events. The stories continue with Keisha's podcast, Walk Good, and YouTube channel, Talkin' Tales. So here is Keisha.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that great introduction. A little bit about myself is I am a storyteller, and people often ask, well, what does a storyteller do? And the obvious answer is storytellers tell stories. But when you look up the definition of a griot, which is a storyteller from Africa who is from a long line of tellers, they will tell you that a griot is much, much more than a storyteller. They are your politician, your librarian, your teachers, your philosopher, your advisors. Decisions are not made or changed without consulting the storyteller, because they know what is, what was, and give ideas on what is to be. And with that, I say that everyone has a story. And we've been taught to not judge because we do not know the story. but we're also told to take the emotion out of the things that we do. From my personal experience, I've been told that I needed to be strong. I need to carry certain weights on my shoulder with strength and regalness. I wasn't to show fear or unconscious bias. And so I carried it all and I did everything. But in doing that, I built anxiety, an anxiety that on most days no one would see or know except for me. But there were other days where functioning was difficult. There was cracks in my mask and my cape was just beyond repair. I say this to tell you that we all have a story and an experience, and a lot of them are ingrained into levels that change who we are and allow us to behave differently. Take a journey with me. Let's travel to Central Africa, a large kingdom with a very, very bold, strong, loud, and by every element and every sense, a cruel master. He looked at his people and told them that they all must do everything on their own, carry the weight on their own, build a house on their own, figure out their own ways to praise their own gods, and do it all alone. And the people did. They listened, they obeyed, and they tried to do everything on your own, but it left many things undone. It left so many things in the space, difficult to understand. And there were just a lot of people who didn't speak to one another, because if they had to do it on their own, they would do it wholly and solely. This behavior did not please any of the gods in the kingdom, and they sent their oracle. Now, the oracle is a man who is very spiritual, has his ears to the gods, receives their messages and shares it with the people. And so he went to the king and he told the king, "You cannot rule this way. The gods are unhappy with you." Well, the king can do whatever he wants. That is exactly what he told the oracle. "You don't rule me, I rule you. I will do what I want, and the people will just survive." The oracle said, "Do you not want your people to be happy?" The king said, "Their happiness is not my problem." The oracle left, but he left behind a seed. And as the oracle's footsteps got further and further away, the king started to feel dis-ease, a discomfort that settled in, and it began to rot his heart. He became very ill very quickly, and there was no prayer, no potion, no magic that could heal him. Believe me when I tell you, he died quickly. But the people had a little bit of hope. They knew that they could choose their own king. And so they chose a young man named Akai, because Akai seemed like he believed in the people. He loved the people, and he did. His first course of business was to unite the people, bring them together. And so he sent out an announcement that he would be having a feast and everyone must come. He asked for one thing. He asked that everyone bring a container of wine. Everyone was excited. They would be and get together for the very first time in a long, long time. And they all came. They dressed in their best. They approached the king's tables, which was laid with all kinds of food and deliciousness. Everyone sat down, and everyone who brought a container, that container was poured into a bigger container. And they all sat and gathered. Well, everyone raised their glass, and the servants came around, pouring liquid in all of the cups. The king stood up to bless his people. He told them that this was the beginning of a new age where they would work together and do things in a way that benefited all of them. The king lifted his glass and took a deep, long sip. And when he was done, he stared at each one of the people and dropped his glass. And then he spit out the liquid out of his mouth, spraying everyone around him. And he looked at his people, heartbroken. He said, "You, how do we find merriment with water?" That meant that the one person who thought no one would know if he brought water meant everyone had the same thought. So the whole container was filled with water. No one looked out for the other. No one wanted to truly celebrate with the other. He sent every one of them home. And when they got home, it must have been the longest walk they had, because they had time to think. What would happen if they cared for one another? What would happen if they truly united, not just in living space, but in heart and in mind? What would happen? The next morning when they woke up, every villager had turned a new leaf. They were helping each other. Meals were prepared together. There was laughing, there was chatter, and loneliness was almost eradicated from the village. Why? Because the people learned that they not only needed to share with each other, they needed to listen. They could embrace one another, be in the same space, and help. Every little bit counts. It's true. Every little bit counts. And so I say again, everyone has a story. And what does storytelling have to do with mental health or healing in general? Storytelling is the healing. We say that success leaves a blueprint and we follow it to become successful. But we forget that there are generations before us that have been leaving blueprints. But when there's only one side telling the story, and it's often incorrect, we forget about the things that nurture us. Well, now we listen to meditation music and we do yoga. But all of these spiritual practices have been practiced for generations, and there have been blueprints. And each blueprint says that we need to share our story. And the reason we don't is because telling your story means that you need to place yourself, your whole self, out for all to see. Vulnerability can be difficult to carry when we're too busy being strong and holding ourselves up and out to be bigger and stronger. Now we're singing a different song. We understand the importance of really uniting, understanding that vulnerability is strength too. Having an open heart and an open mind is just as important as being bold, as challenging yourself. They have equal weighting, if not more. And when we share our stories, we understand that storytelling has a real function. It's the process of healing. We are able to share and connect. Having emotion and connecting that to your vision or what you want to bring about is important. We've been told for too long to eliminate it. Don't be or don't apply emotion to the things that you do. But it's funny how many public speakers today, motivational speakers, will tell you, if you can think it, you can be it. If you believe it, you are there. That would bring us back to our childhood when we sat at the feet of storytellers who told us stories of Cinderella. For me, it was Anansi. Telling us stories of these characters and allowing us to connect with the character, wanting to see them win, wanting to feel them win. We learned how to behave with one another. We learned that sharing was important. Why? Because Anansi was greedy. And when he took everything, he lost everything. Anansi lived in a village. And he lived in a village with an old woman. And this old woman's name was Five. And as she grew up, everyone called her Five this, Five that, Five, Five, Five. But this old woman was a witch. And she decided that the next person to call out Five would disappear. The the whole village was cursed. But as time went on, people grew up and moved away and different things happened. And that cruel, cruel spell became a whisper, became a rumor. And Anansi decided that he would test it. Why? Because her food was hard to find. And Anansi didn't want to do the work. Well, I know Anansi best. Anansi is a mythical creature with the face of a man and the body of a spider. He's known for being witty, very clever, and also very, very lazy. And here Anansi was at a time where it was difficult to find food, and he didn't want to work, but he did want to reap the benefit of all those who passed by. And so he built himself 5 hills. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But one thing that everyone knew about Anansi was that Anansi didn't go to school like everyone else. So when it came to reading, writing, and adding, everyone knew they'd have to help Anansi. That was part of his game. So he called out to Brother Cow. Brother Cow, come. Brother Cow was walking by with 2 large bags of greens, every delicious green you could think of. And Nancy wanted the bags. He said, Cow, help me count these hills. I don't know how many I have, but I did a good job. Wouldn't you agree? Cow did. And he counted 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time he got to 5, Cow disappeared, leaving behind those 2 bags of greens. And Nancy was happy. He took them and hid them away. When he came back out to his hills, he saw Brother Goat passing by, and Brother Goat had every fruit you could think of. Delicious. And Nancy's mouth started to water. He called Goat, come and help me count these. And so Goat did. 1, 2, 3, 4. Goat was gone, leaving behind all of those delicious fruit. And so Anansi took those 2 and brought them inside. And Anansi went on throughout his day, tricking everyone to count to 5 and taking all of their spoils. But what Anansi didn't notice is that Pigeon had seen everything and decided, Anansi needed to learn a lesson. And so he came down from his tree and walked by Anansi's house, where Anansi said, look at these, help me count them. Pigeon agreed. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the one you're sitting on. Pigeon, that's not how you count. Try it again. He did. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the one you're sitting on. And Nancy was so frustrated with Pigeon. You don't know how to count. People have been counting these hills all day. Let me show you how it goes. 1, 2, 3, 4. As Anansi got to 5, his eyes grew big and poof. And Nancy was gone, leaving behind everything that he stole. Pigeon collected all of those goods and split it up with everyone in the village. You see, that day, Anansi learned 2 things. 1, how to count. And 2, that you should never be that greedy. Always, always share with your people. Stories tell us how to behave, shows us what society is and the good and bad way to do things. Stories tell us who we are as well as those who came before us. I've learned so much about different family members. My auntie, I learned who she was as a woman, as a person. I only knew those through the stories. I was often around the corner listening in the kitchen because children were seen and not heard. But not being heard was always a good thing because I learned their stories and I'm able to share some of them today. One of the things that I learned was family, you get together. There was always a big meal. Big meals bring people together and we learn about each other. We comfort each other. I saw every strong woman in my family who had homes, did work, were nurses, working very hard. When they got into the kitchen, everyone had a role and everyone knew what to do. Some did the cutting, others manned the stove, others did the washing, but they were together and they were talking about life. And as children, we played because we were carefree, not a bill in sight. Why is it important to share our stories? Our stories are important because they heal us. They're ancestral healing. The blueprints that have been left are passed down through the stories that we tell. And if we're no longer telling our stories, who will listen? Who will receive comfort and solace from our experience if we don't open up? It's important that we see ourselves. And the best way to do that is through story. And when I tell you a tale, you tell another. And we all seem to be connected through a character or through an experience. We think that all our stories have to be good. They don't. We are different. And in some circumstances, our differences are held against us. But there are times when our differences can make the most or mean the most. This is a story of Aniko. Aniko was a young girl. She lived in an African village with her family, and they lived happily. They did everything together. They cooked, they cleaned, they played, everything. Much like everyone else in the village. They were so happy. Until one day, a sickness rode through that village like a fire, taking out everyone in sight except for Aniko. Well, she knew she couldn't stay in her village alone. She had to find somewhere else to live. So she began walking away. She walked and walked until she came to a very thick forest. The trees were as tall as mountains and thick. When she looked inside, it was dark. There were stories about this forest, stories of people who went in but never came out. And there were other stories too, of a village on the other side where, much like Aniko's village, would take in a stranger. After saying a short prayer, Aniko went inside. She walked and walked until she was tired. She pushed aside leaves, stepped over vines, had her feet squished in green brush, but she kept moving. And you know what happened? You're right. Her prayer was answered. She found the path that led her outside of the forest. And when she got outside, she looked around and thought to herself, what a beautiful country this is. And as she continued walking, she got closer and closer to the village. And as the village came in sight, the villagers started to come out to greet her. That's when Aniko noticed something. She noticed that the villagers had very long necks. Even the children had long necks with little heads on top. Well, as the villagers came out to greet Aniko, they noticed something different about her too. They noticed that she had a very short neck, much like yours and mine. Now they stared at each other for some time, until one villager broke the silence. Little girl, what are you doing out here by yourself? And that's when Aniko told them about what happened to her, her family, and her village. And there was something about Aniko that the long necks trusted. They asked her to stay. They were not wrong about Aniko. She was warm and happy and very hardworking. She would follow them to their marketplace. She would celebrate in their celebrations and share in their sorrows. But that wasn't the best gift that Aniko gave to the Longnecks. You see, every morning, Aniko would get up very early and walk across the village, and she would start to sing. Yes, Inole. Yes, Inole data. Which meant it is a new day. Rise with me. Let's enjoy the day together. And wow, believe it or not, the Longnecks had never heard singing before Aniko had come to the village. It was such a sweet sound that they would not get up and begin their work until after Aniko sang her song each morning. But in this village, like every other village in the world, there was one evil, jealous, small-hearted man who did not like Aniko just because she had a short neck. He called out to Aniko, Aniko, and she came quickly, excited to help. And he said, do you not see that you bring trouble here? You and your short neck bring trouble. Why don't you take your short neck and leave? This was a surprise to Aniko, who did so much for the villagers. Wow. She was so distraught that without even thinking, she ran into the forest. But the forest had changed. The rainy season had come and the leaves were wider, the vines were longer, and the brush was so much thicker. She lost her way quickly. She got tired and fell to rest. She was alone and afraid. The next morning, the villagers waited to hear Aniko's sweet song, but it never came. They waited and waited and waited until they started to get up and ask each other, have you seen Aniko? Have you seen Aniko? Aniko, have you seen her? They gathered in the center part of the village and asked each other, but no one had an answer until one of the elders had an idea. He said, I think I know someone who could help, and took everyone to the home of that evil, jealous, small-hearted man who proudly said, I got rid of the short-necked one. We are safe. The villagers, they were furious. But what could they do? They could not go into the forest after Aniko. They could get lost too. So they thought and thought. One of Aniko's friends had an idea. Why don't we sing to Aniko like she has sung for us? This was a great idea. But the Longnecks had never heard singing before Aniko came. They had never tried singing either. But this was important. So they agreed that they would sing Aniko's name and tell her that they missed her and they wanted her to come back. They did. They started to sing for the very first time. They held their hands and it sounded like a nails on a chalkboard. Aniko ni sawani, Aniko ni sawani, chene nene ba mame, chene nene ba mame, which meant, Aniko, we miss you. Aniko, we need you. Please come home. Well, the sound of their voices trailed from the village into the forest and into Aniko's ears. When she heard their song, she knew it was the Longnecks trying to help her. She followed their voices and found the path that took her back to the village. When she got there, they were so excited to see her. The chief of the village had something very important to say. He spoke to Aniko and the villagers, and yes, even to that jealous, evil, small-hearted man. He said, Aniko, it is not the length of your neck that is important. It is the goodness of your heart. Well, the people lived happily from that day forward. And well, for me, I love this story. I'm Jamaican, and my mother will always tell me this. If you do good, then good will follow you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Keisha. That was amazing. And I feel like we definitely had to hear that. I feel like we got some good connection with that. Good stories, like I was gonna say, like, I feel like stories just connect us as a people. And I feel stories go way back. They're passed on. So I guess it's kind of like a nonsense question, but I guess I can just ask you, how did you get into storytelling? Why was this your calling?
I like to tell people that the stories chose me. I grew up with stories, but as you get older, you get busy with life and do other things. And I was an introvert and afraid to speak in public. So storytelling was definitely not my bag. But I remember hearing other storytellers, and I remember the feeling that they created when I listened to their story, bringing people together and having that connection. And so when I told my first story and I realized that I could connect people in that same way, I realized that I needed to be a storyteller, share stories, remind everyone of the stories of old, and share new stories too.
I love that so much. I relate to that a lot. I feel like I love a good story, and I love telling and passing on a good story. I come from a long line of storytellers, which is not always a positive thing, not always in a positive sense, storytelling. But I guess I know you talked a little bit about your family and how everyone had a role, but I would say, what would be like the greatest lesson you learned from these shared stories?
Oh, wow. Well, I learned so many great lessons, but I guess the number one thing would be start before you're ready. And when I say that, it applies for everything, whether it's a goal, whether it's a new routine, whether it's just finding peace within yourself. We always think that we have to have a dedicated meditation time and a prayer space and, prepare ourselves in that way. But you know what? Do it where you are. Start where you are now and everything else will follow. So just start.
Thank you so much. I think that's a good little logo for us to go with for this week. Start where you are and just start, especially when it relates to Black mental health too. Just start where you are, do what you can with what you have. I think that's such an important message to share. If anyone else has any question and answers to leave for Keisha, please do so in the question and answer box, and we will definitely get to that. However, we do need to skip over really quick to Odessa, because I know Odessa has a few words before they have to run off, and then we'll come back to you, Keisha, if anyone has any more questions. Thank you so much for presenting that. That was amazing. So yes, Odessa, if you're still here, we would love if you can say a few words for us too.
Hello, can you see me? Can you hear me? Great. Thank you so much. Keisha, I always enjoy whenever I come to events and hear your stories. It brings me back to when I was a child. So thank you, everyone. My name is Odessa Grignon, and I'm the vice chair of the City of Pickering Anti-Black Racism Task Force. We call ourselves PABRT for short. Thank you so much for inviting me into this space to be a part of this evening's event to help kick off Black Mental Health Week. A little bit about the PABRT. We're rooted in the community consultation and the sharing of lived experiences. The PABRT was created to identify and address issues of anti-Black racism in Pickering. The PABRT is made up of local residents appointed through council resolution who represent diverse Black communities. The PABRT works in partnership with the city, residents, service providers, and other stakeholders to enhance the shared experience and opportunities afforded to Black residents, to coordinate opportunities for stakeholders and community engagement, to provide expertise and actions on matters relating to anti-Black racism community initiatives, and to celebrate and promote the Black community and Black culture. The PABRT is coming to the end of our 2-year term. In the 2 years since we've been in existence, the task force has worked diligently to create Black safe spaces through hosting several family-friendly community events, such as youth open mic, workshops to help support Black youth pursuing post-secondary education. Last year, we had our Powerfully Informed series to help spread awareness about the 2022 municipal election and to promote civic engagement. We ended off the year by hosting a Black Joy holiday market to promote local Black small businesses. And in keeping with Kwanzaa, we turned around and we were able to raise some money, and we partnered with Grace, No Frills, a bunch of others that I unfortunately am missing, but we created community baskets, diaspora groceries to be distributed amongst residents in Durham region. So we partnered with the Durham Family Cultural Center, the FCC. So in the planning of these initiatives, it was really important, especially as the restrictions related to the pandemic eased. It was important for us to host these events in person. It was really important for us to get together, break bread, connect. We took over parks and just to feel safe. Many of you will know anti-Black racism has been recognized as a public health crisis by several high-level institutions, including the City of Toronto, the National Collaborating Centre for Determinants of Health, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and the United Nations Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent. And this information came from the Black Health Equity Working Group. First and foremost, I am a nurse. So it is super important to ensure that these events we're combating some of the determinants of health related to social supports, health behaviors, and access to health services, culture, and racism. Community connectedness is really important. It promotes good Black mental health. The council has recognized that we recognize our efforts and has endorsed another 4-year term for the PABRT. And it is our mission as a group to continue this momentum, promoting community connectedness. So I guess in closing, I would like to say that if you'd like some more information about the PABRT, please go to pabrt.ca. We've tried to update it as much as we can, but we are a small but mighty group. But most importantly, it will lead you to our Instagram account, Facebook, or LinkedIn, which some of the youngins seem to keep up to date a little bit more than the pabrt.ca. So we're hoping that those of you who are watching will spread the word. Keep abreast to the initiatives that we are planning over the next 4 years. Come out, support us, and just let us know how we can support you as community members. We want to get out there and empower you, provide you with information. First and foremost, my love of health. I want to promote a healthy community. So thank you so much for allowing me to just share some information about the PABRT. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that's amazing, especially framing it as a health concern too. Is this very important for people to understand the impact that anti-Black racism has on people, more than just words. It can impact your health as well. So I think that's a very important message, and we really hope to see more from you in the future in the next 4 years. So that's really amazing work. Thank you so much for speaking on that and educating us on that.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Amazing. And Sam, if you'd like to introduce our next little welcome.
Yes, so I will be introducing Nicole Perryman next, and then we will get into our panel discussion.
We're actually not doing that until 7:40. So let's chat. Why are we here? And John's here as well. So maybe the rest of us can introduce ourselves. And we still have questions for Keisha. We can bring her back on as well, if she's still here.
So the question is, why are we here? Why are we here?
Yeah, I guess why are we here? And Keisha started off doing some really lovely storytelling for us and talking about how our experiences initially started with just feeling silenced, and how that silencing led to anxiety. And through storytelling, we were able to tell our stories. And I know that one of the questions we asked you is how you got into storytelling. And I think I missed the part because I was driving in, but how did storytelling help your own mental health and your anxiety? That's what I'd love to know from you.
Thank you. That's a great question. It helped me to be vulnerable. I had to put myself out on a stage, literally. Gaining confidence in myself and being comfortable in sharing stories that I had a personal connection with. Sharing a Nancy's stories, a lot of people think that, they're just old stories. Yes, these are stories that have been passed down for generations. But when you look at the archetype of a Nancy, they would say that a Nancy is a trickster. But a Nancy, the stories of a Nancy were told to the slaves to give them fortitude, but to remind them of a time before then where, life was, dare I say, normal. Being with your family, taking care of your family, supporting each other, community. So there is that aspect. And being able to tell those stories led me to sharing my own stories. We have a whole slew of childhood stories that we can share, some positive and some not so positive. But the funny thing is that we stopped talking altogether. And I felt like it was not my role or my job, but it was a necessary endeavor to allow us to open up, allow us to connect again. And the funny thing about a story is that it doesn't matter what your race, what your creed, what your color, a story will connect beyond those things and allow us to open up, allow us to have a shared vulnerability, allow us to have a shared moment, and it gives us space to open our minds, see things differently, and learn something new.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think also with my own experience, I grew up too, and I remember Sunday dinners with like my family and relatives, and when we had those dinners, they used to tell stories a lot of the times, and that was like our voice, right? And so I appreciate you sharing that. Absolutely. Thank you. I don't think we asked you the question, Keisha, why Black mental health? Why is this important to you?
Thank you. How do I sum it up? Black mental health is something that I believe we all live with varying degrees. For me, I was excellent at compartmentalizing. And so I dismissed my own mental health and I was busy being strong for everyone else. I'm an older sister. I have multiple siblings. I'm my mom's first child. So I had all these hats to wear and I was very comfortable switching back and forth, but I wasn't taking the time to realize when I felt overwhelmed, to realize my own anxiety until it became a point where I couldn't manage it very well, until I couldn't hide it anymore. And I realized that as much as I'm taking care of everyone else, I have to remember when you go on the airplane, they tell you, you put the mask on yourself first. And I always thought that was the most foolish thing. Why would I ever put the mask on myself? And I was too busy putting the mask on everybody else, realizing they would survive without me because I didn't put it on myself first. I was giving out of a glass that could be almost empty because I wasn't filling my own cup up. And so I really had to take a moment, step back and realize that I add more value. I can be of strength. I can be a source of peace when I'm full or close to full. So in order to do that, I have to take time for myself and focus on my self-care so that I can share everywhere else. And it's not about being strong. It's about allowing yourself to be vulnerable, be willing to say no, and not afraid of what the next person's going to say, but trusting that they will understand.
Absolutely. What you said, I could definitely resonate with. I feel that not being able to absorb or have a space and the ability to kind of unpack and find your own means of healing takes its toll over a duration of time. And I use the analogy of a stone. So every time you go through something that is traumatic or hurtful or something that impacts your life, that's one stone. And you put that one stone into your backpack because you really don't have time to address it. You just have to keep it moving. And then as it keeps on happening through your journey, you keep throwing these stones into your bag until eventually the straps on the bag bust. And then when the bag busts, you look on the ground and all those stones are laid out on the ground. And it's up to you to choose which stone you're going to pick up first to address. And it's something else because you're looking, you're like, well, that stone's important, that stone's important. And it's like, which one do I address first in order to start the healing journey?
I agree, that's powerful.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us your stories. And I really appreciate you coming again, You often come to our events. I very much appreciate it, Keisha. And as you may know, Kujenga Wellness Project is hosting a 3-day event, April 22nd to 23rd, and Keisha will be there to also share her stories and her experiences with us. So thank you so much, Keisha, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So thank you, everyone, so far. We are moving into a panel discussion, and that will kind of lead or end the rest of our evening tonight. If you have any questions, we're centering the conversations on Black mental health. If you have any questions that you'd like to share with us, please let us know. We're just pulling up the panelists now, and we will get started. I just also want to thank Rihanna and Samantha, and Monique, and Brittany for doing an excellent job of welcoming us into this space today, starting off with the beautiful music, with our initial ceremony with Maggie, with all of us, doing our own land acknowledgement, as well as centering anti-Black racism and what does that mean to us, and then showing our Black national anthem, Lift Every Voice. So thank you so much for carrying us through this beginning of the event, and I'm very excited to be able to have a conversation with everyone today about what Black mental health means to us, as well as introduce the rest of our events that we're doing today. And I guess we should introduce John, who also is new to us right now.
Good night, everyone. John Jack, well-being worker, family outreach worker for Kujenga Wellness Project in Ifarada, working with our Afro-diasporic communities in Durham. My favorite color is red. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. We had some questions in the chat, so we can talk about those while we're reading. I don't know who wants to read one of the questions, but the first one was, will Black people with lived experience be leading and representing throughout the space? And love to hear everyone, their thoughts and yeah, their responses to that. Thank you for that great question. Yeah.
I can definitely jump in on for that then. Yeah, so like I did answer that one. And yeah, so as I was saying before, is that in this space, it's definitely, we have a big focus on Black mental health. And that was definitely, it's definitely the whole theme of the presentation today, and also for the rest of the week as well. So we did want to make sure that we have a wide range of people from many equity searching groups as well, and equity seeking groups. So that's what we made sure we had our Indigenous acknowledgement. We talked a little bit about anti-Black racism and the effects on that and the workers that are doing that in our community now. So we did want to put a focus on that, and that was definitely what we wanted for this experience. But we are always, always looking for good feedback and looking for ways we can make these spaces even safer, even more expansive. So we appreciate all of the comments, and yes, we'll definitely make note of that too.
I think what came up for me too was, before, and I always say, like, working before 2020 was quite different than working now. And working before 2020, I didn't have an opportunity to have a voice to talk about these issues. And I think we need our allies. We need those people who don't experience these intersection of identity and the intersections around mental health to also create space for us to do that. And that's what we're trying to do intentionally to do as well. It's important that our allies understand this and becomes part of their workforce. It becomes part of as Monique was sharing, like statements made in work that people understand, not just to talk about it, but also to live it and to create space to have these conversations. So our people who do experience mental health difficulties because of race, because of the identity, are getting the support that they actually need, as opposed to it being silenced or ignored or not even highlighted as well. So I appreciate the comment and absolutely understand our intentionality behind everything that we do. So thank you. And I think that was all the questions that we had today. So I'm excited to introduce Alison Hector Alexander and Stephen Linton, who will actually be moderating for us today. So let's introduce Stephen first, and we'll begin our conversations.
Good evening, everybody. Super stoked to be here. I am doing a bunch of multitasking as well, because one, this is an important conversation and dialogue, and two, it's important for me to do justice to the panelists that I'm going to be introducing. You've kind of heard from Nicole, and you're going to hear from Alison. So the multitasking was, through the power of the internet, looking up everything about them, and the resumes and the information is impressive. And so I am stoked to read that. I'd like to jump into, one of the questions, which was around why mental health, why is this important? I had the pleasure of actually moderating a conversation earlier this week with Tashawn Carter from Big Brother 9, winner of Big Brother 9. And we started to speak about the face of mental health and the different faces that it has, from the pressure that we may put on ourselves to perform to be that person. And I kind of made a joke around my wife would be like, oh my goodness, if this person cut you off, what are you going to do to him? And I'm like, that guy looks like an MMA fighter. I really don't want to do nothing to him, because that ain't going to go well for me. But it's like, I got to be that guy, right? Like this. So how do you continuously perform based on the perception that's put on you? And that, that brings its own pressure. We spoke about the pressure of, kind of the face of public looking at us, and we can't be the angry Black person, but we also have to be suave and sophisticated, and we can't talk too hip hop here, but we can't sound too white there. So there's all these things going on in the background of our minds, trying to navigate various spaces to be successful. And it's challenging, and we don't always have a place to put it. We don't necessarily need empathy or sympathy. Sometimes we just need an ear. So all of this compounds to challenge our mental health. So it's really important to create spaces, safe and safer spaces, for us to have this type of dialogue. So again, excited to be here, excited to have these conversations, and excited to get into some of the dialogue. So let's begin. Okay, Nicole and Alison, I think I'm about to impress the heck out of you with my Googling skills, and then add in my own. Maybe I should speak to ChatGPT and see if they need me to start writing for them in the background. So first and foremost, introducing Nicole Perryman. Nicole Perryman is cousin Perryman. She is phenomenal, amazing. I have had the pleasure of working on various projects with her, and every single time I think she's like hit the pinnacle, she does something else. I'm like, oh my days. But Nicole Perryman achieved her master's in counseling and is a certified psychotherapist, play therapist with the Canadian, with the Canadian Association for Child and Play Therapy. Nicole has been working with children, youth, and families for over 15 years in areas of child welfare, child abuse, and trauma and counseling. Nicole has also worked with women who have experienced abuse with partner relationship, historical sexual abuse, and sexual assault. Nicole's practice seeks to empower, strengthen, and educate individuals to achieve their internal and external wellness by providing a holistic counseling approach. She's mindful of how difficult experiences can impact one's emotional and developmental functioning, and thus therapy is client-centered. Nicole's success is a testament to the power of perseverance and the ability to overcome adversity. She serves as a role model for aspiring entrepreneurs, particularly those from underrepresented communities, and continues to work tirelessly to pave the way for the next generation of innovators. Nicole's image should be next to Black excellence, and it is a pleasure to continue to engage and work alongside her. And then moving on to Alison Hector Alexander, again, cousin Alexander Hector Alexander, trendsetter, trailblazer, innovator, creator, creative, absolutely paving the way for what this type of work can look like. Alison is an equity and inclusion specialist with over 15 years experience creating and leading policy, education and training, and anti-racism, anti-oppression, allyship, and equity. Alison is the Director of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion with the Regional Municipality of Durham. Her most recent work experience was as Director of the Office of Equity, Diversity and Inclusion at Durham College. That is actually where Alison and I first crossed paths when I was working on the Black Experience Project. There she had oversight for the college's diversity and inclusion services, the Ontario Access and Inclusion Program, and sexual violence mandate. She was also responsible for the first People's Indigenous Centre and Orientation and Transitions Programming for all students, all new students. Alison was the first coordinator of the Women's Centre and Campus Food Centre on campuses of Durham College and Ontario Tech University. She works from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive framework. Her work also included designing, developing, and facilitating skills development programs for women in transition from violence to independence. She has also worked with a wide range of clients, including youth at risk and street-involved youth, Ontario Works recipients, and new immigrants. Alison completed a Bachelor of Arts degree in Adult Education and Digital Technologies and a Masters of Education degree with a focus on anti-oppressive practices, access, and equity in higher education. Hopefully that did you both justice, and thank you, Google. And again, an honor and pleasure to be in this space with you both. And then John, I didn't realize that you were going to be joining us, but I will speak. This will be my personal, my personal ode to John. So putting it out there, John and I have worked for many years in Scarborough. We have laughed together, bossed jokes together, broken bread together, and essentially cried together. As a member of the City of Toronto's Community Crisis Response Program, together, and I say together, we responded to an incident of violence that I think still sits deep in both of our souls and hearts, but we did it from a trauma-informed lens by ensuring that the voice of those who were impacted continuously got heard. I spoke about cousin Nicole and cousin Alison, and this is brother John Jack to me. Brother John has been there. He has been a pillar of our community, maintains a calm demeanor, and allows a safe space for open conversation, regardless of the subject. And I can honestly say that the trajectory of my career has been such because I've been able to ground myself many times in John's presence. So grateful for all you do. Super dope to see you all in this space, and happy to share this time with you. So again, hopefully words can't do what you all do justice, but hopefully that gives a snippet of the power that you all hold within your spaces and within the work you do, and within the family, within your families. So lots of love and respect to all of you. So now I've given the introductions, but now I'm going to give you an opportunity to put it into your own words, and we'll do it kind of popcorn style. Of course, Nicole, we will start with you. So going to get you to explain your work, why you're here, and why you're passionate about that work.
Sounds good. Did you want to introduce yourself too, Stephen? You didn't introduce yourself.
Oh, of course I didn't. So my name is Stephen Linton. I am a father of two amazing children, a 7 and an 18-year-old. I am a husband to an absolutely amazing woman who allows me to shine and is also my foundation. I am also the chair of Pickering Library Anti-Black Racism Working Group. And I have taken on another role, which I won't quite explain here because there is a similar meeting going on somewhere else. So let's not talk about that. So I have been a resident of Durham for over 20 years. I lived in Durham with my parents, thought I could make it in Toronto, realized how expensive everything was, and then moved back to the basement of my parents. And since then, haven't left Durham. I truly believe in the amplification of voices and supporting to ensure that the diverse representation of our community has a seat at the table where decisions are made, because no one person can represent all communities, races, cultures, beliefs. So identifying those tables and providing opportunities for us all to be at the table is extremely important. There was a question, I think, as Nicole read earlier, about occupying Black space, and are there going to be Black people? Absolutely. And this is why we are now looking at Black History Month extended. We have Black History Month, we have Black Mental Health Week, and next week, a couple of organizations led by Durham One are putting together Black Youth Health Week that is going to look at mental health and physical health. So we are occupying spaces. Black History Month is no longer just a month, and we are continuing to push boundaries, and we are continuing to make history, and I'm proud to be a part of that. So that is me in less than 2 minutes. Okay. So hopefully that was enough space for you, Nicole, going back to the question around explaining your work, why you're passionate about your work, and what drives you.
All really important questions and very hard to answer. But I appreciate all of your experiences, and it's such a pleasure to be part of this space with you all. I treat it as an honor. So thank you all for being here and coming here so quickly to be part of this space. We have a full week of events planned, and in doing that, I was thinking, why, as you said, like what drives me, what's the reason for doing this? And I would have to say that, I was excited to work in the field. I was excited to do social work. And as I was doing my social work in the spaces that I was in, I was also experiencing harm as a Black person, and also witnessing harm being done to my Black clients. And I have had some really great aunties who are always inspiring me to do more and do better. And they were part of that pushing, saying, this is a gap, this is what's missing, this is what we need to do. And so I remember having a conversation with my aunt, who is now with our ancestors, about this organization that I wanted to develop, to build, to support our community and center on their experiences and their identity. And this was like 2007, like very, very long time ago. And I started with a private practice, and then eventually developed this nonprofit, Ifarada, Center for Excellence, and Kujenga, and it's centered on those initial ideas that came in 2007 in the work that I was doing. So it drives me, my own experiences, the experiences of the young women, the men, the children, the families that I've serviced over the past 20 years of service, and listening to their voices and feeling that the powerlessness that they often felt and wanting to do something different. I'm inspired by my aunties and my ancestors who have really guided the work that I've done and given me the values that I need, that I needed along the way to do this work. And so that's my long, short answer of that.
Okay. Again, watching you work, watching the growth and expansion of Ifarada and Kujenga, you see the passion and it actually puts your words into action. And my hope is that we can continue to grow the knowledge of the work that you are all doing. This is recorded as well, so I'm hoping that we can also share this broadly and widely, and they can see the genius behind the logo. So awesome. Same question to you, Alison. Your work, why you're passionate about your work, what drives you?
Thank you, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's really, an honor to be here and to be able to have this conversation, with family, with community. And so, as you mentioned, Stephen, I work with the region of Durham, and I lead the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Division. And really, why I do this work? So I am mom to two young kings. And they're my why. They're my why. If I can crack and have some light come into their lives and stay in their lives and keep them safe, and I can, effect change at a systemic and structural level where I stand. That is my hope. And so my hope has always been, how do I lift community? How do I, create pathways so that I am not the only one? How do I, lift as I climb? And so those are important to me. The more folks who look like me, who are part of my communities, that I can support, that I can create pathways for, that I can, open doors and create seats, and not only create seats, but support voices. That is my why. And so that is why I do this work. So yeah, that is my why.
And doing, that's my slight correction. Not a 1-2, not a doing, because there has been a renewed confidence and faith that we can actually get this done since you coming on board. And it's, I've shared this with Alison before, but I go into different spaces. It's just like, we need to talk to Alison. I was like, yeah, we do. Not a problem. Let's send a quick text, right? So, and the neutrality that you bring, and I'm going to speak openly. I think one of the biggest challenges that I've had trying to adapt to Durham and kind of the work in Durham is we work together and then we work apart. Right. And every now and again, we'll come to a meeting. It's just like, oh my gosh, this was a great meeting. It's like, I never want to work with Nicole ever again. Right. Which is, and we really need to attack these issues as a collaborative. And I say that because you are the center of so many conversations, and there is so much belief, and no pressure, of course, after this. There's so much belief and faith in you because of what you have accomplished and what you continue to accomplish, that that you see when the region is at the table, this is a good thing, so shout out for you for creating a space where people feel comfortable and being the center of all of this. Brother John, same to you, my friend. Your work, why you're passionate, what drives you?
My work, okay, so my work is specifically working in our communities and supporting our residents, our clients, our families, our brothers, our sisters, to my best ability to navigate them through the challenging times that they experience. The reason why I love working in this field is because I understand what it is growing up in a struggling situation, coming from a single parent home, living in areas that you would label as marginalized, and just living through those lenses and understanding the pain and struggle that people go through. I knew that eventually, once I'm of age and I'm able to be in a position to support, that was what I was going to do. I knew that's what I was going to do. I didn't know how or what it was going to look like. That it happened organically. And I've worked alongside you, Stephen, for several years. We've seen the pain. We've lost a lot of young people. That sits heavy on our hearts. I've worked several years with Allison. She is the foundation of the Black Student Success Network at Durham College. She made that happen, which is not easy at all. And it inspired me. It inspired me to do more, especially when I'm surrounded by other individuals who are like-minded and have the heart and compassion to really make things happen for our community and for our younger generation. I have 3 children, hence the gray. I do this especially, well, as long as I can, but I do this for them. I do this for them because it's important for us to pave the way so they don't have to fully go through the struggles that we endure and that we see and that young people encounter. And yeah, and I just love our community. There's a mixture of feelings. I love it, I hate it, I embrace it. It's a collage of feelings, but at the end of the day, I'm all for it. Right? Yeah. But that's, is there any other question? Did I answer all of it?
You did. And again, you actually opened it up to so much more, because as you talk about that collage of feelings and the array of emotions that we've gone through, I think the pandemic, I think a lot of people underestimated the impact on the pandemic on the Black community. You know, I remember speaking or working with an institution, and they were talking about, you know, okay, it's COVID, we've got to shut everything down. And it's like, well, there's services for students that are needed and necessary. And it's like, okay, well, you know, hopefully they can find and navigate with through some of these services that are open. But they forgot about the Black newcomer community that couldn't go home because of how rampant COVID were in some of these these countries, and then how could they access some of the health services that were, you know, provided to Canadians, and no one to help them navigate it. So with that, kind of brings us to the next question of looking at the pandemic. How do you feel it impacted like the Black community, whether that's physical health or mental health, and some of the outcomes? And I'm going to throw that to you first, Alison, if that's okay.
It impacted us. You know, when everybody was saying that, you know, we are all in this together, you know, I kept on pushing back and saying, but we're not, you know, we're all experiencing the pandemic, but we're all, you know, dealing with all the different levels of inequities, disparities, injustices, all of it differently. And more so, you know, communities that have been historically and presently marginalized and, you know, excluded and harmed and violence. You know, I'll share a personal story with you. One of the mandates around restrictions to being out in community. And I remember my partner having to go to work, and I remember, you know, nagging him and saying, "Did you get that you know, paperwork that you can put on your van? Like, did you get that paperwork?" And for a minute, you know, he said, "Yeah," like, you know, just sort of snappily responded to say, you know, they said they're going to give it to me. And I remember thinking, I don't want you to leave the house without it. And I was questioning myself as to that very strong emotion of not wanting him to leave the house without it. And it, you know, and it was how we're surveilled, you know, as Black communities, as Black individuals, Black men. And so that came from a place where I had that privilege of being able to work from home. He never had that privilege where he had to be out in the field. And the thought of him being out in the midst of a stay-at-home restriction and being stopped by police literally brought me to a halt. And so when we talked about, you know, the pandemic on Black communities, I mean, if we even start from, you know, interaction with, you know, police, if we think of, you know, who are the folks who were the front-facing, underemployed, precariously employed folks in the care areas. I think of who are the folks that did not have the proper access right off the bat. We think of there's so all the different structures and disparity that impact Black communities, which in itself impacted mental health for so many of us. Right, the restrictions, the isolation, the significant increase in intimate partner violence. So there are so many layers. So when everybody kept on saying, we're in this together, it was no, we're not in this together. We're not, people who lost their jobs, people who are barely surviving, people who are losing family and couldn't breathe. Like there's so much that was happening to us as communities. And not to say that it wasn't happening in other communities, but it was impacting us in a very different way. And on top of it all, there is this resistance to not do the data collection that would speak to how this was impacting us. So the further marginalization of not wanting to do the work, the resistance to collect that data, that to show how our communities being impacted in itself was an injustice. I feel an inequity that was being inflicted on Black communities. But I'll stop right now because I can, as you can probably tell, I can go on. So I'll stop right now. But yeah, so all of that.
Yeah, and I mean, it speaks to the different lenses. So actually, it's like a great segue for John to speak about from your lens about what did you see about within the pandemic and how it impacted the community and our community.
What I saw, well, specifically in Durham, I saw there was an increase of young Black males who were homeless. It was extremely concerning because traditionally you would see a young Black male walking, going about his business, going to the court or going to the community center. But these were young men who were looking disheveled. They were kicking around stuff, looking for cigarettes on the ground, not necessarily approaching you and asking you for anything, but more just kind of talking to themselves. I was like, this is not right. And it increasingly started to get worse as the pandemic was progressing. The conversations I was having with parents was really frustrating because I think this is the first time they were sitting in the space with their teens for long periods of time. Usually when you're off to work, you're doing your thing and your child's at school. So by the time you come home, you're spending roughly about a couple of hours and everyone's gone to their respective places or to bed. But this time you actually had to sit in it and be very creative with space. There were some households where you have like 2-bedroom apartments and there's like 5 kids in there. And all day, every day with 5 kids in a 2-bedroom, I couldn't make it. No, it was too much. There were times where I had to leave my house, go stand in my garage for an hour, just to calm myself down, center myself, and come back inside my house. Yeah. It was something else. But imagine the individuals who didn't have the capacity to do so. If you don't live in a house, you can't just leave for a minute. You're stuck in the apartment. And to troubleshoot through a lot of those situations sounded very difficult. Through Kujenga, we had our Christmas wish list where we had clients and community members where we had to drop off gifts and present to during the season. And the amount of families that were just at need for those items and so thankful, beyond thankful. And it wasn't like we were giving $1 million. We gave what we could. And even with those little things, they were so gracious and be like, we truly appreciate this. You didn't even have to do this. So it showed the need. It showed some of the desperate situations. It definitely showed struggle, but I wasn't seeing any solution. Like Alison was saying, in terms of collecting data and saying, okay, this is the data that we're gathering. What can we do to rectify some of these challenges? No, everyone was kind of left to fend for themselves. And at the end of it, you're seeing anxiety out the roof, criminalization out the roof, domestic violence out the roof.
Yes.
all the clients I have now are DV. And if you look at the history, it was majority over the pandemic time.
And you know, you started off centering this in the Durham experience. And again, through our work in Toronto, one of the challenges I see of Durham is in Toronto, you almost had those areas that you could go to because you knew there was vulnerability there. Absolutely. So we knew we could go to this area and you could set up and you could go to that area and set up. But it's different here. It's not just social housing, right? It is one house, 5 families, 10 families. It is a landlord of a 2-car garage home, multiple backyard space, but families in there that are struggling, right? Rooming houses that are rooming houses and won't be caught to be rooming houses. So how do you distribute some of the supports and resources? How do you identify those in need? And so kind of like continuing down on that path, maybe Nicole, you can speak to, you know, what you saw, but also again, just the ability for the organization to pivot, like what did you see, and speak maybe a bit about how you identified need during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that was a great question. I think Allison and John really highlighted some of the things that we saw. I would add loss was tremendous, and I'm even going through it now, and there was almost like a byproduct, right? So a lot of the people that I've lost recently didn't get their checks done in the last 2 years, and they found out that they had cancer, right? So that was also, I think, highlighted by the pandemic. And then I shared before just the impact of the racial trauma. So watching racial trauma things happen and experiencing that within your workplace and even your children, you know, feeling safer at home because they weren't exposed to racial trauma, then they go back to school and then they're experiencing all those things again. That was really tough and really impacted our mental health. And for young people that I counseled or work with, a lot of them ask questions like, why is this happening? What's going to happen with our future? So they were wondering and questioning things like that we often took for granted, like life and spirituality and that. And so in terms of what we pivoted, I mean, I remember like maybe months before saying, I hate phone counseling. I will never like do groups online. And within like a couple of days, I was doing phone counseling, video counseling. We started doing groups online. I started applying for like all these grants for food and for counseling. And I think we just saw the need and we just met it, right? Kujenga started in the height of the pandemic. And the reason why Kujenga was so popular at the time is that we decided to do everything online, and we had groups online, and we had parenting programs online, and people joined and listened because we were able to meet that need at that time. So yeah, just that pivoting is the word we heard a lot, but yeah, we pivoted really quickly to meet the need.
I think there's another piece that I really want to capture based on what you've just said, and that is the supports that now are available in Durham. It's and shout outs to Taibu, although what I'm going to say, I might have Lieben follow me and just like watch when you're in Toronto next, I'm going to catch you. But it's been interesting because the Catholic School Board did a survey and looked at an engagement strategy of some of the students, and it was Taibu that was consulted on that project. And by doing that, although Carrier were on board, there was a lot of the promotion of Taibu services. Now, throughout the pandemic, we were told we can't go nowhere, you shouldn't be on the road, you can't go. So now a potential service that I'm used to and I've got all this information is in Toronto, but I can't travel to Toronto because we're supposed to be on lockdown. So where do I go for those supports? Where do I go for those resources? And I think it's really identifying and highlighting that over the last few years, there's been a huge growth in terms of recognizing the challenges, using the data to highlight the rationale for some of the programs, and actually then moving it forward and creating many of the programs, you know, DFCC are doing their thing, Kujenga Wellness are doing their thing, Harrier have adapted their services. Even I was in the school and saw the youth outreach workers sitting on a desk in the main hallway. So now these services have now adapted to the need of the community. I'll say young people, but the community within Durham. So again, I'm hoping these kind of forums can continue to promote what we have. And Toronto's a great place, but you don't always need to go to Toronto. And I really hope that we can start to look at how do we get a Black focused community health center? How do we utilize spaces? So we've got something that looks like the spot in Malvern right here, where young people can access space in a way that is safe and comfortable for them. You know, you can get into a dispute and be a little loud, but we understand that loud doesn't mean violent, right? It just means loud in a lot of cases. Yeah, so hoping we can work together to continue to do that and promote some of these services. But as you were speaking, Nicole, you started to talk about some of the challenges. So I guess, what does mental health, how does mental health manifest, or how have you seen like the impacts of mental health within the Black community? How do you think Black people experience, or what issues do you feel Black people experience with their mental health?
That's such a broad question, I think. Just to almost narrow it down, we have our own experiences, like intergenerational experiences that it's passed down from us. And so we carry that, and then we experience racial trauma. So it's almost like we're stacked, and that stacking kind of makes it difficult for us as we navigate different spaces. And then there's lots of narratives that influence and impact our mental health. So we have narratives like we need to be strong, or, you know, men are not supposed to cry, we're supposed to man up. And when we're going through things such as loss, for example, we don't have the opportunity or the outlets to be able to express how we're feeling, because that stuff is stifled or silenced within us. And it just continues to build, right? I think Keisha talked really well when she said that it comes to a point where we're not able to take care of ourselves, and we start to fall apart, or we can't breathe. And that experience then makes it difficult for us to have really good relationships. It makes it difficult for us to perform well at work or do well in other parts of our lives. So other things start to fray when we are not taking care of ourselves or putting ourselves first. And the thing that I've seen with like my aunties and other people is that it leads to cancer, it leads to bodily heart disease, it leads to other physical diseases that we struggle with. And it seems like we can pay attention to those things first, but we're not so much paying attention to our mindset or our feelings of depression that we have. So it's so compounded and so layered and so intersectional. I'm sure my colleagues would also add to kind of my description as well in terms of what they see too.
I completely agree. It's nuanced. It's so complex, because I think that there are so many, you know, many layers and contributing factors, anywhere from, you know, who we have to be in the spaces that we occupy. So the code switching that has to happen. You have to be 2000 and you know, 100 times, you know, better. You have to work harder. You have to, you know, all of this in itself takes a toll. The interactions that we have, the worry that we have, you know, for our own children. And I can speak to that personally. You know, I worry about my children as they get older, and what experiences will they have? And, you know, and I know it's not a healthy, but I worry. I look at them, I look at my 11-year-old who's probably almost soon, and if you know me, you know, I'm a tall person, and my son reaches me, and he's 11 and he reaches me by my shoulder. I worry. He's only 11, right? So there's so many contributing factors. The fact that we don't, you know, as communities name mental illness, that it is still not okay to say I need help, or that I need to go see Nicole, I need to speak to someone, I am struggling, I have been sad for this extent. We don't talk about these things. I think, there's a small group maybe who are more now, being comfortable. Like I know many of my girlfriends are very comfortable to say, I said that to my therapist and she said this, and and we're normalizing it because we have to, right? Because depression is real, anxiety is real. We have these things happening to our bodies, and that we don't know what is happening. Like, I can think of, first panic attack and what that did to me in the middle of downtown Toronto, and not knowing what was happening, to my heart, to my chest. So these are the things I think that we normalize and we talk about, what is anxiety, what is depression, what is happening, and that we need to talk to someone and look at diagnosis. So I think there's so much mistrust around our healthcare system. I think there's a lack of access as well of culturally appropriate and responsive services. So we stay away. We have that interaction. The person does not understand our experiences. And so, I have worked in situations where when a woman has shared, the next morning CS is at her doorstep. So there's a lot of mistrust around medical racism. There's a lot of mistrust around access. There's so much that contributes to, our mental well-being that we need to start to really talk about openly, like this, forums like this, throughout the year, not only, during this week, but, throughout the year, so that we can start to really normalize, what mental illness looks like and what do we need for our own mental well-being. I strongly believe that.
John, I'm not sure if there's anything to add, like just even in terms of what you've seen.
Yeah, to echo what Nicole and Allison was saying, I noticed that our community was realizing that you needed to be a true advocate for yourself. And it really showed, especially in these times where doctor visits, all those things were lessened, and there's only a chosen few that were let in, and you really had to plea and bargain and get your point across for what you need and what you wanted to get done.
Yeah.
And if you were one of those people who put your hands down or put your head down, like, I don't have time for this, then you kind of face the consequences of not pushing forward. And I was hearing this time and time again, where appointments were being canceled, no explanations, or being very dismissed very quickly and given Band-Aid solutions and stuff like that. So yeah, you really have to be a true advocate and push forward. And yeah, and everything that was said, I echo that.
I'm actually going to switch gears a little, because there's a couple questions in the chat that I think are really important, and this conversation segues really nicely into it. So one of the questions is, how do you combat the stigma to encourage individuals to seek mental health supports when you can see or when they're struggling? And I'll kind of leave that for anyone who wants to take a crack at it. So how do you start to combat the stigma of mental health within the Black community? Actually, maybe I'll add to it, because it was interesting. I think you just said it, Nicole, where, or was it you, Alison? Sorry. But it's like, I'm actually going to speak to my therapist, right? And I would say not too long ago, saying that in the Black household was just like, what? Like, are you crazy? Are you mad? Like, you have to go and see a therapist. And now it's started slowly, but we're getting there to become normalized and a safe thing to say and a safe thing to do. So we're seeing that, and I think it's because the faces of the therapists are changing. It's not just speaking to someone. And again, we've got to look at who we are as a culture. We're very private, right? So the notion of speaking to somebody outside the family was scary. And not that it's just outside the family, it's someone who doesn't look like you, has no idea what you're going through, cannot relate to any of your experiences. But now you can go in and you can start the conversation with, well, you know, do you need something? No, no, no. Our parents just cooked up a big pot of rice and peas. And it's like, oh, I know exactly what that means. You are full beyond belief. So we're good. So again, even just being able to open conversations with the lightness of being able to identify changes who you're speaking to. And I think that's where some of the acceptance might come. So kind of looking along that line, what else do you think can be done to combat the stigma of mental health, to encourage people to go and get help if and when needed?
The power of discussion and transparency. When we have spaces like this and we have community discussions, being able to be very transparent and share your testimony and your journey allows people really to resonate or not resonate, but to actually hear and feel what someone's going through and share. That's how I feel stigma is the way we need to break it. You could always advertise and say, you know, stop the stigma and all those type, but it's different. It's different when you're in a space and you're actually having a rich conversation about these things, and there's no judging in that space. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm a psychotherapist in a Trinity household that don't talk about mental health. So everyone doesn't think I have a real job. And this is constant. I remember going home to Trinidad one time and my uncle had this conversation with me like, I want to be a therapist and like you can go into business and make more money. Mm-hmm. So what I've done in my family, as an example, you know, as I shared before, there's been some serious stuff that's happened and I'm just there to listen and create space to listen. I think that helps when people share with you like some things that they're struggling with, and they don't do that until like in the middle of a conversation or, you know, when they're at their ends rope, and you just listen, right? You just show empathy and compassion. And you also take care of yourself too. And I think sometimes even myself as a therapist going through the pandemic, like I also had stuff I had to deal with too. So being able to take care of yourself also helps to combat the stigma. For our young people, as soon as they're as little as they can be, talking to them about their feelings, talking to them about, you know, what happens in their body when they have a certain feeling, not penalizing or criminalizing their behaviors. So you see young people who sometimes they get mad and they say things or they slam doors. Let them be, because that also allows them to express themselves and who they are, and creating that space allows them to be able to be comfortable with sharing, and they will. And that I think helps to combat stigma. And for our elders, just, you know, being, as John said, being really transparent and supportive and clear, and sometimes even questioning some of their belief systems about certain things that don't always make so much sense. But my uncle now is eating his words, by the way, just so you know.
Yeah. And I think it's recognizing too, it's in people's own time, right? One of the things that I learned a lot in working within the shelter system was that, you know, a survivor can come through the doors 10 times and not until, you know, she's ready, you know, that she will say, okay, this is it, I'm not going back. So I think one of the things in that, when we're talking about it, in that I agree, we want to normalize, we want to, you know, talk openly about, you know, our own experiences. We want to share, you know, resources that look like us, like all of these things. But it's also recognizing that people will, you know, you provide, it's like, you know, we go to the buffet and here's everything that's available for you, right? That there's a space where we can create the space so that we can have conversations, or you can just listen. And then when you're ready, you can make that step to access the resources, and how can I support you to access it? And that is one of the issues that I always had, was that, you know, working in Durham and having to, you know, finding the culturally appropriate resources in Toronto. And for, you know, for a student to jump on the GO train, that wasn't accessible, right? And that is why it's so important that we build and we approach what we do here in Durham as a collective because it is needed, because it's not accessible for everybody to make that trip to Toronto, right, to access resources. So I think it's how do we continue to really advocate the need for these resources, because if we're saying that we're in, we live in communities, with the highest number, of Black folks in the country, we need resources that are for us, by us, accessed by us, right? Like that is huge, and not driven or run by or owned by other folks who don't look like us, right? For us, by us, accessed by us.
And again, I think that last piece brings us right into a question that again was in the chat. And knowing that there's now the data to support this in terms of the Black population in the town of Ajax, and how we're one of the most populated regions in terms of the Black community. Why do you believe that there is pushback for creating programs and services that support Black mental health?
Structural racism.
Okay. Mic drop.
Yes. Because the data, I mean, we have data as recent as the 21 census. The data is telling you who's here. The data can also tell you what the needs are. The data can tell you, if you look at the mapping piece, where the gaps are. So there's no reason, there's nothing for not allocating the resources, and we have the professionals and the competence and the intelligence to offer the services. Yeah. So we are capable, we're enough, we're more than enough. So that is the only reason, right? It goes back to, the structures, the legislation, the laws, all of these pieces that are on the books that prevents that from happening, that continues to perpetuate and to perpetuate throughout, right? As we think, well, as we feel that, things are changing, that whole, the more things change, the more they remain the same. And I think that is the only reason, because there's every data point, data set tells us, right, that the need is there, that we are here and that we need these services, but yet we struggle to, to access, healthcare. We struggle to access, Black women are 4 times less likely, and maybe more now, to have access to a professional, right? Black professionals going to hospitals and are treated like they have no, that they shouldn't be there, right? Like I know of a professional within a hospital who went to her hospital, and was told that I won't give you if you're here for drugs, you're not gonna get that. This is a professional within that hospital. So it's structural racism. It's nothing but that structural racism that continues to, not see us as needing the care that we are deserving of. So this is where I'm very intentional when I speak around equity and equity groups, because I'm not searching for equity. I deserve equity, right? And so, but I'll stop because I get very passionate about that.
But I think that's a huge piece of it, Alison, because we are passionate, because we do this and we're fighting because we feel it. And this is the importance of being at the table. We're talking about our own experiences, trying to access services. Really quickly, before I throw it to Nicole and John, maybe to speak a bit more about that. I remember being in a session that Nicole had put on, and it was about how we cope. And I remember very boldly, I'm like, well, when I'm stressed out, I just jump on my motorbike and ride as fast as I can. And then I was like, I probably should have said that out loud. Actually, subsequently, like a couple of days later, I got stopped by the police. So maybe there's a tie-in there. But it really was because I didn't see anything else that could support me. And you don't want to put the burden on your family. You don't want to put the burden on your friends. You also don't want that constant reminder sometimes that you're going through stuff. So, you speak about it, and then one day you're looking sad. And it's like, oh my gosh, is work stressing out you again? I'm like, no, actually my football team just lost. So that's what I'm saying, right? But again, I think it's important to look at pushing through this and creating those services. So kind of in the same vein, but switching it up a little bit, Nicole and John. Did you see any barriers? Were there any barriers as you started to attempt to expand Kujenga and IFRADA, and what was the pushback? You know, can you speak to the pushback around creating some of these services?
I have so much to say, but I won't say a lot. In the chat, one of the participants says, it's amazing how established other communities are, no questions asked. Yet we continue to justify and fight for appropriate services. And it was a struggle. I remember reading an article, it was called Unfunded, and talked about 1% of the resources that were sent to people. Only 1% were sent to Black-led organizations. And that is the truth. That's what happened. That's what happened. And I continually saw, as I worked in those systems and also helped my clients navigate those systems, the amount of structural racism that Allison talks about so keenly that they experienced, and knowing that we could do something different. And there's evidence, like in the States, they have evidence and research that shows that when you service your community and have that cultural experience grounded in understanding of racial trauma and intergenerational trauma and all the other experiences that Black people uniquely have, there's better outcomes. There's better outcomes for our young people, for our families. But here in Canada, there's almost a denial of racism, and that denial of racism makes it difficult for us to have these conversations. Yes. And then that shuts us down. So if I'm applying for a grant and this large organization is also applying for the same grant, they're going to get the funding because they can say the right things and they have the resources to back it up. So it has been extremely difficult and tireless, and it's been hard. And I guess I will end on one last note, but I talk a lot about my auntie, and I had this auntie too who started her own organization in 1990s in Durham region. It was for refugee women who came into Canada and needed a place to stay. And she did an amazing job with this organization, ran it for a couple years, and it all fell apart. And the reason why it fell apart was because of funding. And because of that, she also lost a lot of her own things that she had worked really hard to accomplish. And I say this because, and I can also talk about Imani's place and Lisa, we talk about as leaders, we see the passion and we compensate for that need because we know that that need is there. And we do it on our own backs, where heads of other organizations aren't even thinking about doing that. But the work that we do as Black community members is really to close a gap that exists for a family, and we give it all. We give it our all. We give all our finances to do so, which isn't seen in other places. So our barriers are that, but I'm hoping that we continue to push together as a collective against some of these systems so that we can make some lasting changes for our community.
Absolutely. And you know, I wonder for it to John, because you have, like, again, we've all had our experience in terms of Durham and Toronto, but you know, I think when we were responding to, and you know, the incident, it was you and maybe, you know, shout out to Solar and you know, one or two others that looked like us, that was serving a community that was us, right? And the others that came in were very much, or seemed to be there very much for the funding. Oh, we got to be there because this is going to be now how we get funding to do more, although it may or may not meet the needs of the community. So I don't know if you can speak to that, just kind of what you've seen, you know, in terms of the lack of resources for a very specific demographic, and why you think there's a lack of those resources to support.
Yeah, that was an extreme challenging time. And when it did happen, we had many agencies come into the community to support but at the same time, it was to cause some leverage, so it allow you to receive some funding because you're working on something that was so fantastic. It was in the media. But then after that situation died down, all those agencies were gone.
Yeah.
And it was just Stephen, Solar, Mark Rainford. It was a handful of us, Nanika Perry, Alicia. It was just us left. And it was difficult, but we were not going to beg agencies to come back. We knew what we had to do.
Yeah.
And we put our heart into it. Stephen was, he sacrificed his family time. He was out there every day. We were all out there canvassing, going door to door, checking in, walking to homes with therapists so we can do therapy on the spot, which was extremely challenging. But yet we were not receiving the funding to create sustainability. We were able to open, we were able to access Toronto Community Housing. We had a space where we were able to create a community space, but the funding was very limited. It was very limited, and there's specific objectives that you have to make sure that you meet. And one thing that's really difficult is how do you quantify building small relationships?
Yes.
Right? Starting small, building the trust, building the love, and then expanding from there. Automatically, it's like, okay, you're in the community. How many Black youth can you save? Can you save 100? Can you save 500? It's like, not right now. Let's work with 10, right? And it's difficult because there's some agencies that are encouraged and forced to kind of elaborate a little bit instead of actually using true numbers. And speaking true to the data and saying, you know what, this week we spoke to 20 youth, and the following week we only spoke to 10, and then it was a domino effect, and it took us some time to build traction and trust. So there was a lot of challenges. There was a lot of challenges in accessing those fundings, and we had to be very creative. Stephen was able to dip into funding through the Boys and Girls Club. We were able to dip into some funding, and collectively, we were able to do. I forgot what we called it, but we traveled to neighborhoods with the big truck and the barbecue.
Yes, the mobilizer.
The mobilizer. We used to cook and have food and play music, dance, laugh, cry. All of the above, because we found that was the best way to meet the community where they were at. Go to the most vulnerable neighborhoods and the neighborhoods that were hurting. And but once again, funding, right? You could do it for a moment. You start building this wonderful traction, and boop, the funding gets pulled. And then you have to think to yourself, how can I be creative in sustaining and building this back up again? In Durham, it's very challenging also. In terms of getting funding like that, even though we know that Ajax has the most densest population of people of color in the entire Durham and continuously growing, right? So this should be the nucleus, this should be the focal point, and the funding should come here so we can actually develop a taboo and centers out here that caters to the wellness of our community. But once again, don't forget our agency also, we work in silos.
Yeah.
Right. And so that sometimes sabotages the growth. And we have to find a way collectively to work, but being creative, because when you work collectively, it moves your numbers around, right? So there's multiple pieces to the puzzle.
And you raised the point about numbers, and it's what numbers mean to us, right? Mm-hmm. So 5 people for us is a success.
Absolutely.
Because we're part of a system that people don't trust. So the fact that 5 have said, all right, and usually that 5 is the hardest of the 5 to reach, right? So when they come out, if you can appeal and provide and change the experience, then now you have a bigger problem, which now you can't stop the numbers from coming. And I think, again, you spoke a bit about the mobilizer, and I remember, you know, as we went through that, it was like, all right, 100 burgers are cool because we're not going to get people out. But you did it in one community, and then we'd start barbecuing at 3, and all of a sudden 7 o'clock we're still flipping burgers and trying to go to No Frills and get more burgers. But it really is how, as a community, we promote successes, right? Our family will consistently go to one butcher, regardless of where that butcher goes, right? Like, could move clear across Brampton because we promote good service. We promote something that impacts us. And, you know, I think maybe my one experience, which was really interesting while we were with Durham 1, we'd gone after a grant, and they said, hey, you know, in fact, you have the infrastructure to be able to do this, and you know, you seem like you know enough people, but the issue that you're bringing isn't an issue. And the issue we brought is that there's no representation at the tables. There are no Black people at the school board. There are no Black parents at, you know, within the Catholic board who are actually at decision-making tables. So the grant we'd applied for was to try and educate and build the capacity of racialized communities to understand how they work, how decisions are made, and to start to support them to even want to go out to community meetings, provide the resources, you know, whether it was childcare or transportation to get to these meetings. And the funder, I'm not going to say Trillium Foundation's name, said that is not an issue because nobody has raised it as an issue.
Interesting.
Or who would raise it as the issue? The people whose race is at the table, right? So now how do you combat that? And that is part of that structural racism that Alison and Nicole is talking about combating. So
I wanted to sort of jump in, Stephen, sorry, but I just wanted to go back to something John shared around the collective and the trust, the issues of trust within the community. And that is something, just, you know, given the position, given the role that I'm in, you know, that I'm constantly looking at, you know, how do we, you know, come back to the table as community? And a lot of the times I have to step back and remember that the structures, the frameworks that exist puts us in that position, because then there's a piece of the pie that we're all going for. And so therefore, you know, I will not share sort of, you know, what I'm doing here, because this is the community that I've built and the clients that I've built and I need to support. And other people are thinking the same. And so so a lot of that, you know, mistrust in itself comes from the structures that have already been built, the way that they're built, right? The same way that they, you know, position what success looks like. If we get one person, you know, out of the street, that's success to me. But there are the numbers games that we have to play. So there's so many different layers, but I think we have to be really intentional around how we do that, you know, collectivism as community. It is so important, because if we don't do that, then we're cycling, right? We're cycling and we're not coming together the way that we should to move the needle for our community, to develop our community. So that is, I really just wanted to touch on that, because, like, you know, in working with the different groups, that is one of the things, you know, and I'll be in the role, oh my God, actually, I think today, 2 years into the role, and that is one of the things that I am continuously looking at, is sort of why are we not doing this together? Who is around the table? Who is not around the table? Who is missing? Why aren't they there? We need to call them so that they can come join and we can have the conversations, because I strongly believe that we need to be stronger as the collective to advance, you know, the goals of our communities. I just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah. Straight facts and fire, Alison. Straight facts and fire. So
I agree. I just want to add one more thing. Yes. We talked about structural pieces, right? And even funding. So funding dollars went to Eurocentric or white-led organizations in a certain way. But if we're really going to support the Black community and our needs, it has to be different. It can't be the same type of funding. As John was saying, it can't be like how many people that we reached out to and use it as our metric. That can't be our metric, right? We need that opportunity to have funding dollars to use for our own way that we need to do the work in the community. because it's not made for us and it's not applicable to us. And then it creates spaces or barriers where we're then not able to re-access support, or it ends after 3 years. And like, you haven't even watched a young person go through high school, right? Because of the limited amount of funding available. So.
So there's actually two pieces. I'm looking at multiple screens even to where to go, because this opens up so much. I'm also conscious of time, because now even in my mind I have like 500 more questions that I want to ask you all. But there is a piece, and I do want to read it out because I know the answer, and I think this is partially of what we're talking about, creating spaces to build. So you know, in the chat it talks about the program names are from Swahili language, you know, which the writer is a native speaker, but I can tell you that there is no greater anti-therapy group like African people. Yet I've met so many refugee claimants through my church who are in great need of your services. Do you work with refugee groups, or would you be open to offering virtual sessions to them? So I think that's kind of going to you, Nicole. And
yeah, I think I would love to, and I told the person to, I would love to kind of figure out and work with someone to figure out what are the exact needs and apply for even something different. Because we definitely through the pandemic worked a lot with refugee families who came to Canada, and then pandemic happened and they don't have any access to resources. So many of them were strangling to find jobs or support their children, to navigate online school. Like, there were so many challenges that they encountered. So 100% it's a need. And I think I'd love for us to be able to just center on how do we support refugee community members in a much greater way. One of our founders who helped found iForada also worked a lot with refugees, and that was his reason for doing this work too. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, again in the chat, just to give you your flowers, have your contact, you know, someone utilized your services, and thanking you so much for the work that you do. So, and it speaks to us being able to communicate these services. We kind of touched on that a little earlier. And so here is the chance to do that. So what resources are available and what are the next steps? I'm actually gonna take moderator's privilege and start that and say there is, within the school board, within government, municipalities, we are about to start having these conversations about budget, right? We're about to start having conversations about strategic plan. I can tell you that if we are not at the table, there will be a group of people at the table, and there's nothing wrong for them advocating for their communities, but there's also nothing wrong with us advocating for our communities. It is going to take that extra push though, because the meetings are at 6 o'clock. So it means that you can't watch Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy or Family Fortune, right? It means that you may have to hope that the food at the session is what you want to eat. It does mean that you may have to step back into minus temperatures, right? But the payoff is huge, because when we are not at the table and giving these voices and opinions, there are decisions that are made about us, without us, right? And then you'll get the odd thing, right? Okay, we got about $1 million here. Throw them my Friday people like a little 20,000, right? They're blessed. And there's our equity piece. And then now let's do everything else. So I encourage everyone who's on this to be vigilant. This is the time where these decisions are made. Go that extra mile, step out your house, look at your Facebooks, your Instagram, because we are all posting. And I encourage us also to be a little more innovative. We have a circle, so, you know, Nicole, John, Allison, we will send messages to each other, but how many bus drivers are in our circles? How many truck drivers are in our circles? How many construction workers are in our circles? Do they know and understand some of these strategies and opportunities for their voices to be heard. So how do we get to them? Because they are our community as well. All of our children are attending the same schools. We are all attending faith-based institutions and organizations together. So how do we ensure that it's not just the social sector and the human services sector that is communicating, and we all go out like, hey, I haven't seen you in a week at the last meeting, right? How do we start to push and put new faces in the room? So there's my little rant. But now just an opportunity, and again, being a bit conscious of time, an opportunity to talk about what is out there, what are the next steps, you know, what are the things that we should look out for from you and your organization and your circles. Alison?
I thought you were going to say Nicole.
And
Nicole can speak to, you know, all of the resources, you know, that are, you know, in community and most likely speak to it much better than I can. I just wanted to touch on the piece, you know, that you said that we have to be around the table. You know, we have to inform, you know, the frameworks, the services, you know, the exploration that's being done. And that is one of the pieces that I do struggle with, because for me, you know, and leading this work is that it's very important for me, and I have to be really intentional in how I approach it so that communities inform it, whether it be, you know, community safety and well-being plan, whether it be a DI strategy, whether it be the accessible, whatever of the portfolios that I oversee, it's important for me for community to inform it. Community has to come to inform it. Right. And so we can put it out there to invite community, but we need community to make, you know, the effort and to want to be there to inform what it is that we're doing, regardless of how you look at it. And I think it is through these mediums, these platforms, that we can really learn about what is a community, because there are so many, you know, pieces that people are not familiar with and they don't know what already exists. I cannot tell you how many times I've referred folks to Kujenga. You know, this is there, this is available, you should check it out, you should do this, you should, right? And so I think it's so important that, you know, we as you said, we try to be innovative to speak to what is already there, what is available, because there are services that are being, you know, provided by folks who look like us, who understand our lived experiences, who can, you know, make us feel at ease to be able to have some of the uncomfortable conversations. I just wanted to share that, and I'll hand it over to Nicole.
Thank you, and I appreciate that you shared a lot of the services that are being offered. And it's growing, which is really good and helpful, 100%. Tomorrow, I think we're having a lunch and learn at 12 p.m. Hopefully people can come out. We'll talk a lot about intergenerational trauma and how that impacts the family system and how to support healing. And we have lots of other events later on this week as well. Ifrada has a parent and a youth advisory. The youth advisory is a paid position where we have young people share with us what services do they need, what supports will be helpful for them, and what resources we can develop. And that's something that we do. In addition to like the counseling, the family outreach, we're also trying to support, or hoping to soon support, people who encounter the youth justice system and be able to support families and young people to find other options for their life. We're also having a conference April 22nd and 21st, April 21st and 22nd on equity, as well as a great family gathering on the 22nd where we have performers. And so we're trying our best to kind of do community work. We work really closely again with Durham Family and Cultural Center. We share a project together, and we both of us do amazing work in the community. And so we're just continuing to grow and do the work. There's also Women's Multicultural Resource Center. Carrier, as you shared before, is also shifting and changing some of those resources. So we're growing very, very slowly. I'm not matching the population, but we're growing, and we're continuing to need the support and the input from the community to help us continue to take it to the next level.
And as you mentioned, there are some phenomenal events coming this week. So I really encourage everyone to look at the website, look at the IFRADO website, the Black Mental Health Week.ca website that now is inclusive of the events that are happening here in Durham. So you don't necessarily have to travel all the way back for the events. There are also going to be virtual events, and we're continuing to, well, the lights came on, so I'm guessing it's like that music. I was just watching the Dave Chappelle skit where it's like that wrap it up thing. So I felt like that just came on me on the light. So but I hear you. I got it. But yeah, please check out the additional or the events that are going on and going into March break. Shout out to Durham One. They've got some amazing events going on for young people throughout March break, recognizing that is sometimes a time of solitude and loneliness for some of our young people. And now there's opportunities for them to continue to engage. And a lot of work still going on behind the scenes. This is the first year that it's expanded like this into Durham. So shout outs to everybody who has put their hard work, energy and efforts and into making this happen. I'm stoked to be a part of it. And yeah, I guess at that point we will start to wrap it up. I don't know if there's any final words from any of our panelists. So the count of 5.
Just thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for providing this space. I look forward to continuing this work with all of you.
Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity.
And thank you all for your continued work, dedication, and passion for what you do. All right.
And thank you to you for hosting, for moderating, for spearheading this week. You didn't even talk about how you planned the week for all of us. So thank you so much for all your work, Stephen. Much appreciated.
Not a problem. Pleasure. Okay, Rihanna, you have the biggest smile, so I guess you are taking the reins back.
Yes,
So,
thank you so much. That was very insightful and I feel very much needed. And we're so honored again to have Maggie to lead us with a nice closing, just to wrap everything up in a nice little bow. So Maggie, if you are good to go.
I am. So I think in honor of just kind of the chat that everybody just had there, I mean, I can see a lot of the intersections being an Indigenous person, not the same experience, but I can see some of the commonalities and the fighting for funding and all of that. That's been really a thing for Indigenous community for a long time. I'm really a big supporter of this whole initiative that Nicole has spearheaded. I think it's beautiful and it really hits home for me. Anyway, so I'm going to sing a healing song. This one is Brenda McIntyre. It's her healing song. And you might hear my little one laughing hysterically in the background. I apologize for that. Way, hey, hey, way, hey, hey, way, hey, hey, way, higher, way higher, way higher, hey, oh, way higher, hey, oh, way higher, way, hey, hey, oh, way, hey, hey, way, hey, hey, way, hey, way higher, way higher, way higher, hey, oh, way higher, hey, oh, way higher, way, hey, hey, oh, way, hey, hey, way, hey, hey, way, hey, hey, way higher, way higher, way higher, hey, oh, way higher, Yeah, and I just wanted to quickly just share about that sound, that drum sound. Um, one of the teachings I got is that's kind of that first sound that we hear as babies in our mom's bellies. It's that heartbeat, and this is the heartbeat of Mother Earth. It's what connects all of us. They say drumming is better than Prozac. Drum for 1 hour, 1 minute every day, and you won't need Prozac. But anyway, so that was the Brenda McIntyre healing song, and I think that our communities need some healing. So Nyawa Goa, it was beautiful listening to everybody tonight, and Nyawa for inviting me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, and good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight.